The next speaker is Iman Federico Awi. Iman is a PhD student at Leeds
University of Leeds.
University of Leeds. So Iman will speak for 30 minutes, then we'll have a tea break, and then we have a full session after that for discussion with all four of our speakers. So Iman, let me pass to you. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, I'm Iman Federico Awi. I'm both Sudanese and South Sudanese and raised in the UK. So I've completed all of my education in the UK. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a background of myself before I go on to present. But to begin with, my presentation will be looking at the significant role of Sudanese and South Sudanese diaspora in the development of both Sudan and South Sudan, but particularly in relation to the education sector. So from all the presentations so far that we've heard, there has been a lot given on the background, the context, political context as well. And that's a lot of things that I was wanting to touch on too, but I won't touch on it as much because you don't need me to repeat everything. However, it is very much so still relevant in my presentation as well. I'm just going to take a few moments to just introduce myself and what I'm about really, because I think my identity as a Sudanese and South Sudanese in the UK plays a huge role in my presentation really, and in my perspective of seeing the responsibilities that the diaspora have in contributing to the development of Sudan and South Sudan's education system. As I've already stated, I am Sudanese and South Sudanese. I'm currently a PhD researcher at the University of Leeds, and I'm studying the barriers to education faced by Black students in higher education in the UK. Although my research is not based on Sudan and South Sudan, it is very much so based on the barriers and the challenges that are faced, and that's something that I will be touching on in this presentation as well. Just a few more things. So I do have a teaching background as well. So again, that's also informed my perspective on the challenges that are faced currently in the education system. That's one of the things that I've done in this presentation. I've started off with exploring the challenges that are faced, and then considering how the diaspora can contribute to actually overcoming those challenges as well. So yeah, again, just a brief outline of what I'll be discussing. So I'll first discuss a bit about the education system, the current state of it. Again, like I said previously, we've already had quite a lot of the previous presenters touching on the overall state of South Sudan and Sudan. However, I'll be focusing specifically on education rather than the general context. As well as that, like I said, I'll be touching on the challenges faced by the education sector, and as well as identifying the role that I believe that the diaspora should play in contributing to development. I'll also be looking at and sharing with you a case study of another African country that has actually provided some programs that are similar to what I'm suggesting for Sudan and South Sudan. So to begin with, in relation to Sudan, so as you may or may not be familiar with, it has a three-tier education system. So it starts with the basic, which is primary education. It then goes on to secondary, and then there's also vocational and higher education as well. One of the main things that I did identify in relation to the education system in Sudan is the fact that when it comes to, for example, young girls, the education is limited in relation to that for a variety of different reasons. As well as that, we also have lack of actual or the limited number of enrolment rates as well. So when it comes to those who are actually being enrolled now, currently within secondary school, well, back in 2021, it was only a 21% enrolment rate, which is quite concerning when you do think about the number of young people in Sudan currently as well. So there's a few statistics that I would like to just go through just to give you a bit more of an idea as to what the current position is. And a lot of the statistics that I've been looking at come from a variety of different places. So Organisations such as the World Bank, UNICEF, Windows Trust International, Global Partnership for Education, and there's a lot of different organisations that have been looking into the education system and the challenges that are being faced as well. So that's where I have kind of accessed quite a bit of my information from. So since independence in 1956, there has been a lot of changes to the education system in Sudan, and one of the main things that, although yes, there has been improvements, we also need to focus on the issues, because that's the only way we're going to create a better education system. So again, looking at some of the, so I did touch on the enrolment rates previously for the secondary school. Also, when you're thinking about in relation to the staff bodies as well. So majority of staff currently in Sudan are actually volunteer teachers, and also parent hired teachers as well. So that just goes to show the level of quality in the actual teachers in Sudan, and how that could also be a potential challenge too. And that's something that I will address later on, as well as I do go on to talk about the challenges in the education system. As well as that, we also have in the higher education space, the staff to student ratio as well. And that's another concerning figure of 50-1. So we've got for each one lecturer, we've got 50 students in the room. And that's, that is something that does act as a barrier to education, because when you do have a situation where you've got more students that you have to cater towards, then the resources are going to be much more scarce as well because of that. So now moving on to having a look at the overview of the South Sudanese education system as well. So there is quite a lot of similarity in terms of the structure of it, but also one thing to highlight is that the South Sudanese education system does actually lack the early childhood development programs as well. And that again is something that is an issue, because as we all know, education needs to start from a young age. So if we are lacking that, then that means that once it comes to the primary education, the students, the children are going to be a disadvantage really. They're not going to have that prior knowledge that they would have if should they had early development programs as well. In addition to that, just looking at some of the statistics, so we've got 22.8 million children who are currently out of school in South Sudan, and that is, such an alarming figure, and it's really important to actually consider the reasons why this could be. And of course, we all aware that that there's several reasons why this is the case, such as conflict, such as natural disasters, such as COVID as well, such as a lot of different reasons why this is the case. However, these numbers are only growing, and it's really important to actually address them before it does get to an even more alarming rate as well. The next thing that I do want to address are the challenges. Okay, so on the screen, as you can see, I've got a few bullet points of different some of the different challenges that could be faced, and some of them have already been addressed already in the previous presentations. And again, like I said, I'm approaching this from an education perspective, so it may not be the same as what somebody else has said. However, I'm just trying to give that perspective from education as well. So one of the key things that has been a key theme really across today's sessions is the funding. It's the financial constraints that are faced currently, and this is something that I have touched on briefly as I've been discussing the overview. And one of the issues that we have is that when we lack funding, we lack finances, it means that it's going to have a knock-on effect, and it's going to impact so many other things, such as the resources in the schools, such as the materials, such as the ability to be able to even improve or create any policy as well in relation to education, as well as the actual teaching staff. So it's really essential to identify that as an issue, and to consider what could potentially be done about that. The next thing that I want to touch on is curriculum issues. And again, that's something that is at the foundation of education. So in regards to the curriculum, it's actually, so in Sudan, the curriculum hasn't been updated for over 30 years. And it just goes to show that it's really important to identify key areas within the curriculum that do need to be updated because they need to be aligned with society, with the needs of society, and so on and so forth. So that, as well as ensuring that it does align with the actual sufficient standards as well of education, and making sure that it is meeting the requirements. So giving an example of the way in which the education system is supervised. So in theory, secondary schools, for example, are supposed to have supervision from the local institutions, as well as head teachers, for example, in other schools. But in reality, actually, there's not much of that supervision going on at all. And anyone who, I don't know if there's any teachers in here, anyone who's worked in the education system in the UK, but the supervising body here is Ofsted. And I think my institution had it about 2 years ago, and it's a very, very, very intense process. And it does, it's very rigorous. It does ensure that you are meeting those standards. As well as that, we have regular observations, whether you're qualified or not, if you're going through training, you have a lot of observation, you have a lot of scrutiny as well, to ensure that we are meeting the best standards. And that's something that we are lacking in Sudan and South Sudan. It's something that needs much more effort. And again, that's something I'll touch on when I go on to explain the role of the diaspora and how they can contribute to roles such as those. So a few other things as well in relation to just building the education system and issues with it. Again, another concept that's been touched on, brain drain. And it's the idea that the skills that currently are within Sudan and South Sudan, in terms of the teaching staff, of those who are in those education spaces, the skills are just not there, as they're not as good as they should be at the moment. And it's a case that over time it could be the case that people are deciding to leave, people are leaving to go to different professions. So because of that, we're not having those skilled people in those professions, and these are the people who are training others, to the younger generation, to go out into the world, into different careers and professions. So it's really essential that we do have a quality there when it comes to the skill sets as well. And again, that's something that I'll touch on in terms of the role of the diaspora and how they can contribute to educating and to providing training, supporting with training, etc. So just to continue on, just a few other things I'd like to touch on in relation to the challenges that are faced. So as well as the quality of education, the curriculum, the teaching staff, etc., there's also issues related to the political barriers. There's also issues related to other resources as well. And it's really important to understand the fact that, and again, I'm going to touch on the curriculum, because again, it is at the heart of the education system, and how the political situation, how the lack of resources, how all of that can contribute to an insufficient curriculum and an insufficient standard of education, in the sense that it doesn't necessarily align with the specific needs of that society as well. Continuing on, I touched on a case study that I would like to present to you. This is a case study conducted by Nigeria, and it follows a model called Teach for America program, and this specific program is called Teach for Nigeria. So it is an example. That's been put in place, and it's something that has been quite successful in what it's tried to achieve. And some of the things that it has done, in terms of one of the things that I will actually be suggesting as a way in which the diaspora can contribute, is through micro development projects. And these are generally the small scale projects that are put in place to try and provide people within those communities with the skills that they need to be able to run things themselves, essentially. And this is something that did effectively do that. So initially what they did was they provided financial support. Again, that's something that we've been touching on quite a lot already today, as a way in which the diaspora can support Sudan and South Sudan. But yes, so what they did was they provided financial support and resources for educational infrastructure development. So this involved diaspora-led initiatives such as the building of schools, the contributing to the running of schools, the libraries, computer labs, contributing to the digital skills as well, the digital development of people within Nigeria and students as well. And so this work, it wasn't done alone, and they did have to collaborate. They had to join forces with other organisations, NGOs and other government agencies as well, to be able to actually achieve these things that they had done. Another thing as well that came out of this study was that they were able to support in the capacity of teachers, mentors and role models for students in Nigeria. And actually this is something that that can be very effective, especially when it is somebody who is of your own. This is somebody who's got a similar experience to you, somebody who has similar understanding of things to you and is able to come and actually advise you on how to go about certain things. And I think in that term, it's much more effective to have people who are actually Nigerian coming into Nigeria and actually acting as role models, because for those students, for those young people, it allows them to actually see representation and to see other opportunities as well within themselves. So in addition to that as well, some of the other things that this programme did was it contributed to the CPD and the development of teaching staff as well. And again, that's something that I touched on earlier in regards to the challenges that can be faced in regards to lack of training. And what they did was through support with teaching and learning, through support with classroom management, they were able to equip the communities with the skills that they need to again be able to run these programs by themselves, and to ultimately not have to rely on the diaspora to be able to do these things themselves. And in addition to that, also the way in which they contributed to the school leadership programs as well. So having programs in place to ensure that those who are in the positions of leadership within the schools are actually qualified to do so and actually have the skills that they need. Otherwise, you've just got a situation where the blind are leading the blind, and you're not going to get anywhere there. Moving on from that, I'd like to touch on the role of the South Sudanese and Sudanese in the development of the education system in Sudan and South Sudan. And there's a number of different things, a number of different ways in which the Sudanese and South Sudanese can actually contribute. And one of the first things, before I get into it, it's really important to actually understand the challenges that the diaspora might actually face, and just actually sympathize in some ways as to some of the issues or some of the barriers that there can be that can actually act as challenges to the diaspora actually being able to achieve what they want to achieve in terms of supporting and developing the Sudan and South Sudan. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier when I introduced myself was the fact that, I am Sudanese and South Sudanese. I've grown up in the UK. I've never lived in Sudan or South Sudan myself. I've been to Sudan a handful of times. So personally, through my experience, there's been a lot of disconnect, and for a lot of people, and I think especially when it comes to just the question of identity and just the question of, where do you belong and if you belong. I think that's a really important conversation to be had. And it's the case that people don't really understand. I think unless you actually experience something, you don't actually understand what it's like. So the same way that, I might find it a bit more difficult to understand the perspective of somebody who was born and raised in Sudan or South Sudan, is the same way that they're going to have difficulties in understanding my perspective as well. Because growing up in the UK, going through the education system in the UK, that plays quite a large part of my identity. But as well as that, I'm also Sudanese and South Sudanese. So again, that brings other things into the mix as well. So I think already from the beginning, there are challenges for the diaspora when it comes to contributing, and we really need to place a quite importance on that. We need to understand that as well. Although that being said, the diaspora do have a lot of potential when it comes to being able to contribute to Sudan and South Sudan, and you know, people can see the ways in which the diaspora can contribute, whether it's through education, whether it's through experience, whether it's through culture, and whatever else it might be. There's a variety of different ways, not just financially, as some of you have already discussed today. But there's, you know, so many other ways. And I think one of the key things, I'm going to steal a phrase that Abiol mentioned earlier, the idea of, you know, developing the minds. And I think that's really important. And I think it's important to understand how we can actually go about doing that, because that's a huge thing already. And it's not just a case of, like was said earlier, you know, just approaching it from the bottom up. I think also we need to understand about what the current situation is as well, and how we can actually educate people who are in the positions of authority, who are able to make certain decisions when it comes to policy, when it comes to driving change, and just consider how we can actually, as a collective, how we can contribute to actually shifting the narrative and actually changing the way in which we understand the education system, and the way in which we understand what our involvement should be as well in improving it. So again, something else that Abiol mentioned earlier, and that I really liked, was just in relation to the fact that the diaspora seem to be essentially maybe taking the place of the state, or the responsibility of the state in regards to the provision of finances, support, etc. And I think that that's something that we really need to think about as well, because although, yeah, it's really essential for the diaspora to contribute financially, there are also many other ways as well, and it's important to not take away the importance from those other ways that are so essential, because just finances are not going to get us anywhere really, because yeah, it's going to keep us living for now, but that's about it. And I think it's really important to just consider the other things that could be done as well. Another thing as well to consider before I develop further into the different ways in which the diaspora can contribute, it's also to ensure that the agendas of the diaspora, when actually deciding to come and contribute and develop the like Sudan and South Sudan, to ensure that the agendas actually align with the needs of their society, with the needs of Sudan and South Sudan, because it could potentially be a situation where we have the, you know, eager people, you know, from the diaspora wanting to help and coming in with a good heart and wanting to change and develop things, but not actually acknowledging what the specific needs are. And I think that's really essential to keep that at the center of things as well, just to ensure that we're not just coming in and causing havoc, essentially. Moving on from that, so as we've already acknowledged previously, so there's various ways that the diaspora can contribute. So we've already touched on the financial ways, whether it's finances, whether it's investments as well, or contributing to businesses. But also one of the key things, and I think this is key to education, is the knowledge exchange as well. So whether it's organising knowledge exchange workshops, conferences, just ways for people to come together and share knowledge and share expertise, share experiences. Occasions like today, I think, are really essential for people to be able to share best practice, to share challenges as well, to share what does work, what doesn't work, to create the ideal solution. Because I think, you know, at this point in time, we don't really have the ideal solution. We've just got ideas that we can put forward, and we can, you know, try and see if it's a case of trial and error at this point in time. Another thing as well, so in relation to, and again, we've had a few people have mentioned the use of media as well, and I think that is a really powerful way of actually creating those relationships between the diaspora and those back home as well, and just making sure that we are actually in touch. Because one of the key things that I would say is that, you know, since people have become much more active on social media, that has raised my own awareness as well. And because back 15, 20 years ago, in my opinion, I probably was quite out of touch as to what was currently happening in Sudan and South Sudan. But I think through having being able to see it through the lens of other people, being able to see it through the lens of people who are back in Sudan and South Sudan as well, I think that's really an important way in which the diaspora can just become a bit more informed and educated as to what's actually happening, and just to identify ways in which everyone back home actually needs the support, rather than just trying to come up with ways to help. So it's much better to actually hear it directly from the source as well. So that links on to other ways in which the diaspora can support. So through social media, I think social media does, and just the media in general, does present a lot of different tactics that are used, and one of the really effective ones is contribution to policy, also lobbying as well. So those in the diaspora are actually using the voice to actually advocate for those back home in Sudan and South Sudan, and getting involved in that way. And I think that is a really effective way of actually having our voices heard. So an example being back in 1998 and 2000, where protests took place, and a celebrity basketball player, Manut Ball, was actually involved and part of the face, I'd say, of this particular movement, where they were able to then gain attention and ultimately initiate peace talks from that. So I think things like that, although we don't want to have to rely on certain individuals, sometimes we do have to use certain individuals if they have that power to be able to be heard. That's just one of the examples of the way in which the media and other things in collaboration with the media can actually contribute to change and development. So another thing as well, just going back to, again, I guess the curriculum, is contributing to research as well. And I think that that's really essential when it comes to development of education, because with the curriculum, I think one of the key things with that. So, for example, within the UK, we have a very ethnocentric curriculum here, and everyone who is non-white is not essentially represented in that curriculum. So, I think one of the things there that has led to I guess discussions and conversations on that is the fact that research has been done in those areas to actually evidence and identify the issues and identify the fact that actually change needs to happen. So I think that is something that the diaspora can do in terms of when it comes to policy change, when it comes to changing standards of education, quality of education. These are things that the diaspora can actually do to be able to contribute, and ultimately that would be able to start other conversations as well as to other ways that they can support. So another example that I'd like to share is the micro development projects. Now, this is something that I mentioned earlier with the Teach for Nigeria example. And with this, as I mentioned, these are small scale projects, essentially put in place to provide the communities with the skills that they need to be able to run their own organizations, run their own spaces, and there's in this particular project that I found, it was within research by Lyndon Black and Andrews, and they actually did some research into South Sudanese in the Netherlands. And one thing that they found was that, or one thing that they did with this project was it was put in place to fundraise so that they could build schools. And this was to ultimately avoid having children go into the line of being child soldiers. So this is something that was put in place, and with the resources of the diaspora in collaboration with private donors as well. And so again, that's bringing in the funding there, how the diaspora were contributing to that. And it just goes to show how these projects can actually improve and better the lives of the people in Sudan and South Sudan as well. So yeah, perfect timing. So yeah, I just yeah, thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for listening, and also just hoping that hopefully just the few things that I have said today will hopefully inspire you to just consider the ways in which you can actually contribute to the way in which we can develop the education system. And as you can see there's a QR code, so you can scan it. You can get my details if you want to. If you've got any further questions to ask as well, please do feel free to do so. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant timekeeping and very good presentation. Thank you.